I think some of the most important questions to ask as a business owner who is trying to grow is, do you have a solid compensation structure? Are you losing employees? Is there a leak in that talent that you have? And is there a good alignment between your benefits and your compensation structure? These are all great things to learn about. We're going to talk a little bit about this today and take a deep dive. So let's just jump right into that. Welcome to the Modern Executive Podcast, your go-to podcast when it comes to leadership, business, and finance. If you are an executive, if you are an entrepreneur or a leader, this podcast is for you. Think about this. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 3.5 million employees quit in April of 2024 alone. That's a lot of people quitting. And you don't want to have those people quitting your company. You want to make sure that you are not one of those companies that is losing employees and having that leakage. So how do you do that? Before we jump into that, let me give you some things to think about. We work with a lot of companies. I'm in a 401k advising business. We also have an employee benefits arm. So we talk to a lot of business owners. We talk to CFOs, we talk to HR professionals, and we get to see some of those companies that are doing really well with the employee retention, some that are not doing as well, and what has been working and what hasn't been working. Now, it sometimes depends on the industry, obviously, and it depends on the level of the employee and what they're doing, but there are some consistent things that are true across the board. But let's take a different look at things. Let's look at something from a different perspective. The average person spends a third of their life working. That is a lot of time. They spend a third of their time sleeping. So there's not a lot of extra time that people spend doing other things. So if they're spending a third of their life working for your company, you want to make sure they are having a good life, that they are getting fulfillment out of working for you as a company. If they don't get that fulfillment, they're going to have an unhappy life, or they're going to look for something else. They're going to look for something better. So let's talk from that perspective, some of the reasons why people don't stick around. First is company culture. And I know that seems sometimes like a soft type of thing, but what is it that drives people or draws people to your company? One of the things is generational trends. We've seen that quiet quitting trend, which is when people come and work for you, but they don't really put their heart and soul in it. They're just kind of hanging around and getting a paycheck. So there's those cultural things that go viral sometimes, and where people are recording when they get fired and things like that. There's those generational trends. There's sometimes we hire the wrong candidates. Everything looks good on paper, and maybe they interview really well, but they're just not a good fit. Sometimes there are changes in the market. We have unemployment sometimes, and there's high unemployment, low unemployment. Sometimes you have a lot to pick from. Sometimes there's not a lot of people to pick from. And once again, that is also specific to industries as well, but there's general economic trends. Employees may choose to leave the company for lack of growth opportunities. So maybe they don't feel like they're going to move along in their journey as they try to improve and grow. It can be inefficient and ineffective management. Perhaps they have a hard time with the people they're working with. It can be minimal recognition for their contributions to the company. Maybe they want to feel important. If you've read How to Win Friends and Influence People, you'll see that that's one of the keys to what people want, what people desire. They want to be important. And if they don't feel like they're important and they're spending a third of their life in a company that doesn't show that they're important, it's going to be hard to keep those people around. There can be a mismatch between the values of the company and the values of the individual. So if you have a misalignment of values and the things that you really believe in, it's hard to work for a company that has a different view on the world than what you believe, those core beliefs that you have. And then there's, once again, we talked a little bit about company culture. That can be just that maybe just doing those small and simple things that can show that maybe you guys have a little bit of fun every now and then as a company. There can be lack of opportunities for improving skills. I think that is something that we neglect sometimes. People want to develop generally. They want to grow. They want to progress. And if you're not giving them opportunities to develop those skills, they may look for someone else that's going to invest in them and see that value. So now that we see that perspective of spending a third of your life and maybe a mismatch between what a company offers and what an employee is looking for, let's talk a little bit about some of those costs that are associated with losing an employee and replacing them. Often we totally miss the mark when it comes to the true cost of replacing an employee. For example, we've generally said that it's more expensive to hire a new employee or to get a new client than it is to take care of an existing client. And I think companies need to look at their employees as clients in a way. Those are the people that you're serving. Those are the people that you can lose revenue as well if you don't take care of them. And so have that mindset. I think having that mindset is really important. According to a recent SHRM article, the true cost of replacing an employee is easily 3 to 4 times their salary. And that might sound staggering, but let me give you a little bit of perspective. Often different roles have different costs associated with them. There are some entry-level roles that maybe they are a little bit less than that. And then there's some senior roles that maybe they could even be more than that. But let's see how that actually can work out. According to this article, they said that about 60% of that cost estimation is soft costs. Soft costs are those costs that are really hard to actually calculate. It's really hard to know what you're actually paying. And that's why soft costs, in my opinion, are more scary than hard costs, because hard costs you can at least track to some extent. Let's talk a little bit about that, I guess, right now. Lost costs could be productivity loss. It can be employee burnout, for example. Think about this. Someone leaves, and now you have a gap in that employment structure, and you have to find people to pick up the slack. And depending on the size of the company, depending on the role, those people can easily get burnt out because now they're doing more work than they were before. There can be a loss of institutional knowledge. I think that's really important because you can put great processes in place. You can have great training. You can do all these things to try to capture what that business is about. But there are some things that you cannot capture because that comes with experience. That comes with being a part of the organization. There can be that risk of a possible mishire. Maybe you just can't find someone that can easily replace those skills that person brought to the table. There can be a loss of employee morale. That can lead to people even leaving and following that employee that just left. So think about, if there's someone that's really close to the other employees and they leave, even if they don't follow suit, they still may not be as productive as they were before because that one person maybe was a great leader. There's the loss of the brand, for example, because the brand is more than just the logos outside. It's more than just the fancy designs. It's more than a lot of these visual things that we see or the slogans. The brand is also comprised of the people that make up the company. And so you can lose a little bit of that too, especially if someone was a little bit more adamant about the brand, if they were kind of an ambassador of the brand and the company. There's the cost of onboarding and training. Perhaps people have to leave aside other work that they have to go and train that new employee. there is that loss of company culture, the kind of like what we talked about. If you have a specific type of company culture, sometimes there are people who really push that company culture. And if those people leave, then it can be hard to replace that. Once again, it depends on the company and it depends on the size, but even within a specific office, that can have an effect. Now, these are some of the soft costs. Let's talk about some of the hard costs. And those soft costs, that's on an extensive list, but that's a place to get started. So some of the hard costs that come about with losing an employee is, let's say you have a referral structure where you give compensation for people that bring in a referral. There can be external recruiting costs where you bring in a staffing agency. There are some of those internal recruiting costs. There's the job ads that you may be running. There's hiring events. There's employee assessments that you may be taking. There's compliance. There's legal. Sometimes you have to update equipment. There's that workplace infrastructure that has to be updated sometimes with that employee. Now, some of these hard costs and the soft costs, they don't all come at once. It's not like, day one, that person leaves and then all of a sudden you get all of those costs. And it's over time, right? It takes time for people to get situated in their job. It takes time for people to get a rhythm and to get going. So how do you stop that leak? I think that's critical. It's important to see where the leaks are and how to stop it. So one of the first things I think that's important is to see what are the factors that lead people to work for you as opposed to your competitors. You can gather that information by talking to employees and getting their feedback, seeing what it is that makes them want to come and work for you every day. So I think that's a great way to look at things, perhaps surveys, so that, and especially if it's anonymous, maybe people can give you their feedback and say what they like and what they don't like and what they like to see. Another thing that you can consider is taking a look at the industry, see how you compare to your competitors when it comes to compensation, when it comes to employee benefits. We always say it's important to benchmark what you're offering. And sometimes people think that they are offering something amazing. And then when you actually start looking at the data, you realize that it's not as great as you might think. So I think it's important to analyze the data, see exactly where you stand. I think another thing is to make sure you have a very well thought out values and a vision. And I know that those sometimes sound like they're like those soft things that are not necessarily tangible, but I think it's important for you to know what you value as a company and know where you're going, because it's hard to lead if you don't even know where you're going. You want to make sure that the people you bring in align with those values. And then finally, I think it's important for you to look at your benefits and your compensation structure. What we found is there are a lot of employees who will take over or take a better benefit, a better 401k match, a better offering that way than a higher salary. And on the surface, sometimes it doesn't seem like it makes sense, but in reality, compensation is there to help provide resources for people to get goods and services. And if they're receiving other goods and services, such as a good medical benefit, a good retirement plan benefit, that takes care of a lot of things. Another thing to consider is that different levels of occupation, like different occupation levels and different demographics, can really drive what is important to people. So it's important to know with your company, are people going to value a higher salary or are they going to value a higher benefit? And what we have seen is, in general, those who are newer in an industry are looking for a higher salary. So let's say they just get out of college, they have all this student debt, they've been dreaming about this job forever, and they think of all the money they can make with all of that new knowledge that they've gained. They may love the industry, and you hope they love the industry as well, but they're also looking for a nice payday. And as people tend to get older in the industry, as they tend to gain more knowledge, they may realize that, yes, it's important to have a competitive salary, but it's just as important to have a competitive retirement plan and benefit structure. So the more seasoned employees and higher level type of employees tend to go for higher benefits. I hope you've gained value out of this. Please like, share, and subscribe, and make sure that you join us next time. We'll see you next time.